This is Matthijs Marie from Incasu. In this video, I want to demonstrate how we've used scripting in Clarion. To explain scripting, I would say it's the ability to add custom code to your Clarion application. This custom code wasn't prepared when the Clarion application was compiled and made available after it's been compiled. By using JavaScript, you can add custom functionality at specific points in the application, allowing for user requirements of any kind to be applied without changing a single line of Clarion code. There may be other ways to do this, but our technique has served us well over the last 2 decades. I've prepared a sample application, and let's look at the dictionary first. It runs on Microsoft SQL Server. I've got 3 tables: a client table, which has got typical client columns, client number, primary key, and a couple of others. And we'll be looking at the terms and the credit amount columns specifically. The progress table is just a list of progress records against a client. And the macro table is the table that contains the scripts that we store in the database and that we execute then against the application at specific points in the application. If we go to the application itself, it's a standard Clarion application, generated application that I changed a bit. Let's look at the compiled version. I've got the client's grid or browse. If I look at any of the records, you'll see my standard columns that I've got, and the terms and the credit amount, which we'll focus on in this demonstration. So, what does scripting do for me? Well, in this case, it adds the ability to make sure that the terms are valid in connection with a specific list of values. If I was to put in there 120 days, 121 days, it will tell me invalid terms. Changing it back to 120 days, but removing the credit amount, I'll get another message saying that the credit amount must be specified when terms is 120 days. So without adding one line of Clarion code to actually do this kind of validation, I've managed to use scripting to do it for me. And let me show you what the macro looks like. So let's just change that back to 1, or let's call it 1,000, and it will accept it. So let's go to the list of macros. And the one that is used here is the validating client macro. I'll take you through the rationale of the script. So before we go on to the actual script itself, I want to explain that what we are using here is actually JScript. And it is well documented on some of the Microsoft websites. It's ECMA script 3. Which is a fairly old script version. It was made available, I think, in Windows 7, but it's definitely still available in Windows 11. So the scripting is fully functional. We can do a lot of things, having access to the databases through ADO, having access to Office documents through the Office automation objects, and a couple more that we are using. So let's go back to the script itself. It's a typical JavaScript layout, try catch block. In the catch, I just record the error into a variable. Let's look at the terms. We've got a terms array that contains all the valid values. I've got an index variable set to -1 for starters. I then loop through the terms array. And if I then get the correct value in the object that's passed to this, I then set the index to that value. So let me explain the object. The object client is actually my record that was captured. And the terms property is the value of the terms field. I'll show you the code a bit later on. I then use the lowercase value of that, and I compare it with the terms elements to see whether it's the same. If it is the same, the index is then set to the value of I. And if it's still -1 at the end of that loop, we then throw an error, giving an appropriate message. That error then is caught in this block here. The script error variable then picks up that error, and back in Clarion, the script error variable is then evaluated. If it's blank, then there wasn't any error. Otherwise, in this case, there was an error, and we will see the message coming up. So that's the terms. What do we do with the credit amount? Well, this customer says that if their client doesn't have current terms, then there must be a credit amount. So in simple terms, if the index variable that we just stepped through here to get the value, if the index variable is not 0, meaning it's not current, and the credit amount for the client object that we captured is 0. So if it is current, or if it is not current, and it's got a 0 credit amount, then we throw the next error, telling the user that a credit amount must be specified. In this way, you can add as many rules for as many customers using your systems as you like without changing one line of code. Just to show you this again, how it works, let's go to the next record. Current with 0, our rules will not have a problem if I put in the credit amount for current. But if I go back, I change that to, let's say, 30 days. And I give it a 0 credit amount, it will pop up the message for me. And that is the scripting. It's very simple to implement, and it's very useful across almost all of the update forms that you might have in your application. So let's look at the Clarion side of it. To start off with, I want to show you what the ActiveScript class looks like. This is from Mike Douglas. You can get his class on Clarion Shop. We are using the TJScript class, which then is inherits from this class here, the T-base ActiveScript, which has got 2 methods that we're interested in. Actually 3. The init method is the first one, to tell it that we are actually running JScript. Then we use the run method to actually run JavaScript code, and the evaluate method, which returns value of objects in the script that you've just run. Let's go to the Clarion code, update client, and you'll recognize this as the one that I showed you. On the OK button, I've added some code to say if this is not a valid record, then cycle, the typical Clarion way of going back to the form and say, well, you can't press, the OK button can't save. So we've got a valid record method. The valid record method at the bottom here firstly takes whatever is in the on the form and populates a client object for us. So there's client number, name, address, contact number, terms, and credit amount. We then combine in this same variable, we define our script error variable, which is initialized to blank. I then read the macro record, the one with ID validating client. And if there is a script in that macro record, I then run the script, which is a combination of the validation script, the validate script. It's this plus the script error. And I also combine that with the script that I got from the macro. If there's an error, and I'll come back to the error just now to show you how that works. If there's an error, it will say there's a script error. And in this case, it's typically a syntax error that will bring this up. Otherwise, I evaluate the script error variable. that you'll remember in the script, I actually threw an error, and then I set script error to whatever that error was. And if that error is not blank, or the variable for the error is not blank, I then pop up a Clarion message saying there's a validation error with the actual description. So how does the error work? If I go back, the script, the site class, which is another variable that's part of the documentation. So the ActiveScript library actually contains a single text file with everything in it. It's really helpful. There's not much to it, so it's well documented. So this is the error trap method that the site class variable provides. Whenever error occurs, it then calls this method, and I've got a local variable error group to carry all of the values that was passed to it, and that's what I'm testing. I'm testing the description, error description back in the code. You'll remember seeing this. If the error except description is not blank, meaning I've just run the script, but there was an error, I then show the error. Okay, and that will help you to actually have a Clarion application with custom rules for each client without changing anything. One last example that I want to show you is a message. It's a useful utility. The J's message function uses the WScript shell object of Microsoft. And this message works very similar to Clarion. The message is shown, the text says, do you want to proceed, with a caption of update information, and then the flags. 3 refers to yes, no, cancel for the buttons, and the 32 refers to the question icon. When the value is returned, we then evaluate it. If the value is 2, we report that cancel was pressed. 6, yes was pressed. 7, no was pressed. And then unknown was pressed if it brings back anything else. So if I was to run this, there's my pop-up. Do you want to proceed? When I press yes, the message comes up to say yes was pressed. Doing the same for no, no was pressed. Doing the same for cancel, cancel was pressed. So that just adds a bit of user interface to your application, and it helps to guide the user on what to do next. So I've showed you how to apply scripting for validations, which in our case was very useful for most of the update forms that we've got. But you might also consider using scripts for quick reports. When you combine the ActiveX for ADO, that's also defined in the Microsoft documentation, and combine that with Microsoft Excel object, which is part of the Office automation suite, also ActiveX. When you then run a select statement after you've connected to ADO to your database, you run the select statement. Whatever output you receive, you then return the results into Excel, and you save it to Excel, and voila, there's your custom quick report without writing a single line of Clarion code. The next example is we've developed an integration tool with Clarion called Integrat, and you can read up about Integrat on our website. It provides an autonomous programming environment for you to have several scripts running all at once, and each performing a specific task. And I'll be give you an overview of Integrat in the next video. But to continue with scripting, in the next video I will show you that we've been able to extend the Clarion user interface with a custom ActiveX object that we've developed to actually provide additional user interface abilities. So we didn't change, or do not change the Clarion application, but we add a new user interface or a window pop-up on top of it that's much more customizable than just the message function that I showed you. So I hope you found this the information helpful, and please feel free to contact me on clarion@incasu.co.za. Thanks.